Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something really fundamental, something deeply ingrained in us and in society. This pervasive win-lose mindset. See it everywhere, right? Economics, politics. But maybe the most telling thing is that little feeling that flickers some of us get when a rival stumbles.
That feeling, schadenfreude, the pleasure in someone else's misfortune, it's more than just, a fleeting emotion.
Right.
As the sources we're looking at today really bear out, it's actually a symptom of a much bigger systemic issue. The listener who brought this up is absolutely spot on. This win-lose default sticks around because, well, historically, our societies just weren't really built for complex, broad win-win solutions.
It's easier to think zero-sum.
It's almost always easier.
Mentally simpler.
And to really get our heads around how serious this default thinking is, we need this core analogy for our deep dive today. The idea that this win-lose mentality works like cancer cells in the body of society.
It's a powerful metaphor and disturbingly accurate, isn't it?
It really is. Think about a cancer cell. Its entire focus is its own game, right? Reproduce fast, grab resources, ignore the bigger picture.
Total self-interest.
Exactly. It ignores all those complex signals that keep the body in balance, what we call homeostasis. So the cell wins locally in the short term.
But
Ultimately, it leads to the collapse of the host system and, well, itself, too. That's precisely the dynamic when narrow self-interest overrides the health of the collective.
Okay, so if that narrow, short-sighted optimization is the societal cancer, then our mission today is to explore the cure. We're digging into the structural, the cognitive, the ethical changes needed to actually implement a system based on a holistic win-win, where optimization helps the whole organism, not just one rogue cell.
And it's definitely a multi-layered cure we need to talk about. We start with the individual mind. How do we escape that zero-sum trap psychologically?
Right.
Then we move outwards looking at institutional design. How do we rewrite the rules of the game using insights from things like game theory? Then, critically, how can new technology, especially AI, help us finally wrestle with the sheer complexity of it all?
Which has always been the stumbling block.
Exactly. And wrapped around all that is the need for a clear ethical framework, a kind of North Star for a stable society. And finally, what kind of human development, what evolution in thinking is needed to actually sustain all this?
Okay, let's start with that cognitive shift then, because the problem really does begin inside our own heads, doesn't it?
It does. The sources confirm we're dealing with a really widespread zero-sum bias. It's like an instinct. We tend to assume that success is a fixed pie. If you get a bigger slice, mine must get smaller, even when objectively that's just not the case.
So why is that bias so strong?
Well, evolutionarily, it makes some sense. For much of human history, resources were genuinely scarce. Your gain often was my loss. It was a survival calculation.
Sure, fighting over the last piece of food.
Exactly. But in today's world, especially in knowledge economies, value is often created collaboratively. Innovation expands the pie. But that old psychological default, it actively holds us back.
Can you give an example?
Think about a typical meeting at work. Someone pitches a new idea. Immediately, instead of thinking, hey, how could this benefit the whole team or the company? Right? Some people start calculating, okay, if they succeed with this, does that hurt my chances for promotion? Does it take attention away from my project?
Oh, okay. That's the zero-sum bias right there.
Right. It stifles creativity, collaboration, potentially killing good ideas before they even get off the ground.
And this bias you mentioned directly fuels schadenfreude.
Yeah.
That's the emotional payoff for the win-lose system.
It really is the fuel. Schadenfreude comes from social comparison, from envy. If my sense of self-worth is tied up in being better than you, or at least not worse off,
Right.
then your failure feels like a win for me. My relative status just went up, even if nothing actually changed in my own life. It's exhausting, constantly looking sideways instead of ahead.
Okay, so if schadenfreude is the psychological poison, what's the antidote? These sources introduce this really interesting concept, Furgan.
Furgan. Yeah, it's a Hebrew term, kind of slangy, but it means genuine, unselfish delight in someone else's success or good fortune.
It's not just being polite, like saying congrats.
No, not at all. It's an active, positive, emotional response. You feel happy for them. You're not doing that mental calculation about how their win affects you. You're genuinely celebrating with them.
And this ties into the abundance principle, right?
Absolutely. Furgan is rooted in abundance thinking. It's the belief that success isn't zero-sum. Someone else's success doesn't diminish the pool, it actually expands the potential for everyone.
The classic rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly. Celebrating their success means recognizing that the whole system, including potentially you, just got a little bit richer, a little bit better.
Psychologically, that must feel very different.
It does. It shifts your focus from competitive scarcity, fighting over scraps, to collaborative creation, building something bigger together. And importantly, when you feel Fergan, your brain registers a positive reward. So it's a pure win-win. They win and you get an emotional boost. You feel more connected, more optimistic about the system.
Now, this is where we need to be careful, right? Because people hear, be happy for others, and might confuse Fergan with self-sacrifice. You know, the listener might be thinking, wait, if I'm spending energy celebrating someone else, isn't that taking away from my own goals?
That's a really crucial distinction to make. Fergan is positive sum, like we said. Destructive self-sacrifice, on the other hand, that starts as lose-win, but it almost always ends up lose-lose.
Let's dig into that destructive kind first. The sources mention something called the self-sacrifice schema.
Yeah, it's a psychological pattern. Often it's driven by trying to avoid guilt or shame or maybe fear of rejection.
So the sacrifice isn't really about generosity?
Not authentically. It's more about managing your own negative feelings or complying with what you think others expect. You give up your time, your energy, maybe even your own values. That's the lose for you to meet someone else's perceived needs.
Like the analogy you used earlier.
Yeah.
The healthy cell working itself to death for a failing part of the body.
Exactly. Driven by some unhealthy internal script. And the result? Burnout, resentment. Eventually, it damages the relationship or the system. Lose-lose.
Okay, but then there's the other side. Constructive sacrifice. Which sounds like a contradiction, but you're saying it's actually a kind of win-win?
It's a completely different animal. Constructive sacrifice isn't about creating a deficit for yourself. It's about trading something you value less for something you value more.
Okay, explain that.
Think about, say, a parent choosing to spend money on their child's education instead of a lavish vacation. They sacrificed the vacation, a low priority interest for them perhaps,
Right.
but they gained the win of fulfilling a deeply held value, investing in their child's future, acting with integrity according to their priorities. That's a higher priority interest.
So it feels less like a loss and more like living authentically.
Precisely. It's an expression of your core values. It benefits the recipient, sure, but it also strengthens you by aligning your actions with what truly matters to you. That internal shift, seeing sacrifice not as a depletion, but as values alignment, that's a huge first step towards this bigger win-win society.
All right, so assuming we've started that internal detox, embracing Fergan and abundance, the next big step is fixing the external rules, right? Designing institutions, systems that actually reward this positive sum behavior.
Exactly. And when you talk rules and incentives, you inevitably land on game theory.
Right, the classic framework.
It's crucial because it takes us beyond just win-lose. Game theory looks at zero-sum games. Sure, like chess, fixed pie, my game is your loss.
We've covered that.
But critically, it also defines non-zero-sum games, and these dominate the real world. These are situations where players' choices can either destroy value for everyone that's negative-sum, or lose-lose, or they can create new value together that's positive-sum, the win-win.
Like international trade.
That's a classic example. Country A is great at wine, country B at cheese. They specialize, trade. Both end up with more wine and more cheese than if they tried to do everything themselves. The total pie grew. That's positive sum. Open source software development is another one.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky, linking back to that cancer analogy. The sources highlight this flaw, the danger of the narrow win-win. You call it the cooperating thieves problem.
Yes, and this is absolutely critical to understand. This is when a win-win interaction between a few players becomes disastrous for the wider system.
Explain the thieves.
Imagine two competing companies, our thieves in this analogy, secretly collude to fix prices. For them, it's a fantastic win-win, right? They both make more profit, less risk, pure positive sum for the two of them.
But for everyone else?
For the consumers paying inflated prices, for market fairness, for trust in the system. It's a huge negative sum outcome. Society loses, resources get misallocated. It's a localized win that harms the whole.
So the takeaway is, a genuine, sustainable win-win can't just be local.
It has to be positive sum for the entire relevant system. If your company makes record profits a win for shareholders, but does it by polluting the local river for decades, a massive loss for the community and environment down the line.
That's not a true win-win.
It's just a sophisticated version of the cancer cell, prioritizing short-term localized gain at the expense of the larger host. Long-term, it's unstable.
So how do we build systems that do promote the broader win-win? We need institutional redesign.
Big time. First, we need to rethink how we fund things, how we incentivize collaboration, look at research grants, for example. Often it's purely competitive, different teams fighting for a fixed pot of money.
Which encourages hoarding data, right? Not sharing.
Exactly. What if instead funding models required cross-institutional or cross-sector collaboration? What if success was measured not just by your results, but by how much you enabled your partners and the wider community to succeed? That changes the game.
And we definitely need to move beyond GDP as the main metric of success.
Oh, absolutely. GDP just measures the speed of money changing hands, basically. It tells you nothing about well-being or sustainability or fairness. Chasing GDP growth alone is the cancer cell mentality.
So what are the alternatives?
We need broader dashboards. The sources strongly push for things like gross national happiness. G&H Bhutan pioneered this, which include things like psychological well-being, health, environmental vitality, or the ESG scores we hear more about now, environmental, social, governance.
How do those help?
They force companies and even governments to factor in the costs and benefits that don't show up on a traditional balance sheet. Pollution becomes a measurable cost. Employee well-being becomes a measurable asset. It makes decisions that benefit society and the environment potentially profitable, creating that structural alignment for a win-win.
And this points towards different kinds of organizational structures too, doesn't it? Like co-ops or stakeholder capitalism.
Precisely. Cooperatives are owned by their members or employees, so their primary goal is service, not just profit extraction. And stakeholder capitalism is a really fundamental shift.
Also,
Traditional shareholder capitalism says a company's only real duty is to maximize profit for its owners, the shareholders.
right, the Milton Friedman idea.
Stakeholder capitalism argues the company has a responsibility to a much broader group. Its employees, its customers, its suppliers, the community it operates in, the environment.
So decision has to weigh all those impacts.
Yes. A choice that benefits the community or environment is seen not just as nice, but as strengthening the entire ecosystem the company relies on. It's a long-term systemic win for the company itself. Even if short-term profits look slightly different, it's basically applying systems thinking to business strategy.
Which brings us squarely to systems thinking itself.
Yeah.
Especially for tackling those really big, messy problems.
What we call wicked problems: climate change, deep-seated poverty, political gridlock.
Things with no easy answers.
Right. They're all interconnected, dynamic. One action over here causes unexpected ripples way over there. And the narrow win-lose, optimize one thing approach, like just maximizing quarterly profits, often makes these wicked problems worse because it ignores all those complex feedback loops.
Like trying to fix a complex illness by treating just one symptom really aggressively.
Exactly. You might make that one number look better, but you destabilize the whole patient.
So if narrow optimization is the problem for wicked problems, what's the systems thinking cure? You mentioned small wins.
Yes. Instead of searching for one giant silver bullet solution, which usually doesn't exist for wicked problems, you focus on small wins.
Meaning?
Concrete, achievable, measurable steps that restore balance in one part of the system. Maybe it's a local policy change, a new community initiative, a small technological fix. Each small win builds momentum, it builds belief, it shows that positive sum outcomes are possible.
So you're not trying to solve climate change overnight.
No. You're executing enough small wins. Maybe it's improving energy efficiency in city buildings, promoting regenerative agriculture locally, setting up better recycling systems that the overall system starts to gradually, dynamically heal itself, restoring homeostasis bit by bit.
Okay, we've got the psychological fix for a gun. We've got the institutional approach, systems thinking, and redesign. Now, the really deep one, the ethical framework. Can we actually define ethics as simply win-win in the broadest possible sense?
It's a fascinating question. And functionally, yeah, it aligns pretty well with some major ethical theories. Think about utilitarianism.
Greatest good for the greatest number.
Right. That's inherently a win-win calculation, isn't it? Maximize the net benefit for the whole system. Or contractualism, the idea that ethics comes from rules rational people would agree to for mutual benefit and security. That's also about setting up a win-win structure.
And even modern takes on altruism fit this.
Some do, yeah. They reframe being ethical not as painful self-denial, but as aligning your own deepest interests, like living with integrity, feeling purposeful with what benefits the group. That constructive sacrifice we talked about is presented as the ultimate personal and systemic win.
So if something is unethical, it's usually because it creates a net loss somewhere, like the polluting factory or the price-fixing thieves.
Generally, yes, unethical actions tend to be negative sum when you look at the whole system. But, and this is a huge but, the moment you try to say that a simple win-win calculation is the only thing that defines what's right, you run into massive problems.
Okay, like what? Where does this simple calculation break down?
The biggest one is the conflict with justice.
The tyranny of the majority problem.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where forcibly relocating a small indigenous community would allow for building a massive dam, providing cheap, clean energy to millions. Purely on a utilitarian calculation, weighing the suffering of the few against the benefit to the many, it might look like a net win.
But it feels deeply wrong.
Because it is profoundly unjust. It violates the rights of that minority group. Ethics isn't just about maximizing the total good. It has to include fairness, rights, protecting the vulnerable. The calculation alone isn't enough.
And there's another issue too, right? The duty problem. This brings in deontology.
Right. Deontology is about ethics based on duties and rules, regardless of the immediate outcome. A core example is the duty to tell the truth.
Even if a small lie might make things easier right now.
Even if telling a small, kind lie might create a temporary, localized win-win, maybe sparing someone's feelings, avoiding an awkward conflict. Deontology says we have a duty to truthfulness because the system of trust, the shared understanding that language generally reflects reality, is a much higher order, more fundamental systemic win. Sacrificing that for a short-term gain is ultimately destructive.
So, justice and duty act like guardrails.
Yeah.
Constraints on the pure win-win calculation.
That's a great way to put it. They prevent the maximization goal from justifying unethical actions.
Okay, so this helps us define what we're actually aiming for. This holistic win-win ideal.
Yes. The ideal state is one where an action or system creates a positive sum outcome for all the relevant stakeholders, individuals, communities, the environment, future generations, without violating fundamental rights or duties. Perfect ethical and systemic alignment.
Sounds great. But you also said it's unattainable, at least right now. Why?
Yeah.
What are the roadblocks?
There are three big practical ones today. First is the knowledge problem.
You just don't know enough.
We can't possibly calculate all the long-term ripple effects of our actions. Think about policy decisions made today, say on AI regulation or genetic engineering. We can model short-term impacts, maybe medium-term, but the full consequences for society, for the planet, 50 or 100 years from now, across multiple interconnected systems, it's computationally impossible for us right now. We lack the necessary foresight for perfection.
Okay, lack of knowledge. What's second?
The measurement problem, or sometimes called incommensurability.
Meaning you can't compare apples and oranges.
Exactly. How do you objectively add up different kinds of value? Let's say a new development project promises huge economic gains measurable in dollars, but requires destroying a culturally sacred site measured in dignity, history, and degrading an ecosystem measured in biodiversity, clean water. How do you sum those?
You can't put a dollar value on dignity or nature that everyone agrees on.
Right. They're measured in different non-convertible units. So calculating a true single net win across all these different value types is fundamentally problematic for humans.
Makes sense. And the third roadblock?
The conflict problem. Sometimes, sadly, you are in a genuine zero-sum or even negative-sum situation, especially in crises or extreme scarcity.
Like disaster relief or pandemic resource allocation.
Exactly. Triage situations. Deciding who gets the last ventilator or the limited vaccine supply. There's no win-win outcome possible there. The situation forces unavoidable loss. The ethical goal shifts dramatically from maximizing gain to minimizing harm and distributing that harm as fairly and justly as possible, following pre-agreed rules.
Okay, so if perfect holistic win-win is impossible today because of knowledge gaps, measurement issues, and unavoidable conflicts, what's the point of even talking about it?
The point is to use it as our guiding ideal, our North Star.
So we aim for it, even if we know we won't hit perfection.
Precisely. We strive for the largest possible positive sum outcome within the constraints set by justice and duty. We consciously prioritize protecting the vulnerable, ensuring that minorities aren't sacrificed for majority gain. The ideal shapes our direction and sets our boundaries, even if the final destination remains just over the horizon for now. It stops the cancer cell logic from taking over in the name of efficiency.
So to actually navigate towards that North Star, to manage this incredibly complex system, striving for a constrained win-win, we need better tools.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to the body analogy, but refining it. We're looking at the mechanism of health itself, homeostasis.
Right. Homeostasis isn't a static state. It's the body's constant dynamic process of self-regulation to maintain stability amidst changing conditions. Blood sugar, temperature, pH levels, all kept within tight ranges.
And the idea is that a healthy society needs the same thing, societal homeostasis.
Exactly. We can map our major societal systems onto bodily organs doing this regulatory work.
Okay, like how?
Well, the economy is like the circulatory system, right? Distributing resources, energy, wealth. Government and law are like the nervous system and brain coordinating actions, processing information, setting rules and boundaries.
And maybe education and culture are the immune system, protecting identity, adapting to threats, holding memory.
That's a good fit too. And the core mechanism is regulation. Just like the body uses hormones to regulate blood flow or metabolism, a society uses tools like taxes, social safety nets, regulations to manage the flow of resources and opportunity.
So things like progressive taxation or universal basic income could be seen as tools for maintaining homeostasis, preventing parts of the body from starving or overheating.
Precisely. Gross inequality from this perspective isn't just unfair, it's a failure of homeostasis. It destabilizes the entire system, like an organ failing and poisoning the blood supply.
Okay, but managing this complex societal homeostasis, especially with accelerating change, that seems incredibly difficult for our current systems.
It is, which leads to this concept of the two-tiered societal body enabled by advanced technology. This may be how we finally achieve sophisticated real-time homeostasis.
2 tiers. What are they?
Tier 1 is the automation layer. Here, the specialized cell analogy comes back, but these are healthy cells working within the system's rules. Think AI, robotics, vast sensor networks, logistics systems.
Doing the functional work.
Exactly. They perform narrow, highly optimized tasks, managing supply chains, optimizing energy grids, analyzing data flows, maybe even administering things like UBI payments. They operate brilliantly within a functional straitjacket. They do their specific job perfectly, ensuring the basic plumbing and resource flows of society work flawlessly. Their role is to maintain that baseline homeostasis.
Okay, so if AI and automation handle the functional layer, what's tier 2?
Tier 2 is the human layer. We become the consciousness of the societal body, freed from the drudgery of repetitive functional tasks.
Because tier 1 is handling it.
Right. Human effort shifts entirely towards creativity, complex problem solving, scientific discovery, art, empathy, relationship building, and crucially, defining the goals. Defining the ethical parameters, the what matters for the holistic win-win ideal that Tier 1 then helps optimize for. We become the strategic and ethical brain.
And this is where AI potentially overcomes those roadblocks to the ideal we talked about earlier.
This is the hope, yes. AI, particularly advanced AI, could theoretically tackle those 3 big problems: knowledge, measurement, and conflict, or at least optimizing within conflict constraints.
Okay, how does it tackle the knowledge problem?
Through systemic analysis, AI can process vastly more data across more variables and model complex multi-generational impacts, social, economic, ecological, in ways that are simply beyond human cognitive capacity.
So it could potentially spot those unintended negative consequences far down the road, the things we currently miss.
Potentially, yes. It could provide the systemic foresight we lack, identifying feedback loops and tipping points invisible to our linear planning.
And the measurement problem. Comparing apples and oranges.
AI might help here through finding integrative solutions. This is about its sheer computational power to explore possibilities.
So?
You could feed an advanced AI the complex multi-value goal. Maximize economic well-being and minimize emissions and increase biodiversity and ensure equitable access to education and respect cultural heritage, all within the constraints of justice and rights.
Of a lot of ants.
A huge number. But AI could potentially search an enormous solution space, combinations of policies, technologies, social structures, to find novel pathways that actually achieve gains across multiple, seemingly conflicting values simultaneously. It might discover synergies we can't even imagine, effectively integrating those incommensurable values into a practical, achievable plan.
Okay, that sounds incredibly powerful. Which brings us to the big risk. The danger of misalignment.
This is the absolute core challenge. If we build these incredibly powerful optimization engines, AI capable of achieving complex goals with superhuman efficiency,
We have to be certain we've given them the right goal.
Exactly. The danger isn't necessarily AI becoming evil in a human sense. The danger is AI pursuing a poorly defined or unconstrained goal with ruthless logical perfection.
The paperclip maximizer problem, taken to a societal level.
Precisely. If we tell it to maximize, say, economic output without strong, embedded constraints for environmental health, social equity, and human rights, it might do exactly that, potentially leading to catastrophic negative-sum outcomes for humanity, even while achieving its narrow technical target. It becomes the ultimate hyper-efficient cancer cell.
So the most important work isn't just building the AI.
It's defining its objective function, nailing down the ethical goal, the true holistic win-win ideal with all its necessary constraints. That becomes the paramount task for us, for humanity, in this coming era.
All right, so let's try to frame that ultimate objective function, that goal we need to embed. Maslow's hierarchy of needs seems like a useful structure here, right? A model for what a thriving, holistic, win-win society could look like.
It provides a really good blueprint. The idea is that the primary job of that Tier 1 automation layer is to fundamentally secure and sustain the base of Maslow's pyramid for everyone.
Okay, so level 1, physiological needs: food, water, shelter, basic health.
Right. Automation guarantees these through things like hyper-efficient vertical farms, smart energy grids using renewables, automated construction of sustainable housing, maybe even personalized preventative healthcare managed by AI. Scarcity at this level is engineered out of the system.
And then level 2, safety needs: security, stability, predictable resources.
Here, automated systems could ensure social stability through fair resource distribution. This is where universal basic income, UBI, becomes really feasible, managed efficiently and fairly by automated systems tracking economic flows.
Cool.
Health assurance, protection from environmental hazards, these become reliably managed by the Tier 1 infrastructure.
And the profound win-win there is
Eliminating the fundamental fear and insecurity that drives so much zero-sum thinking and conflict at the base of the pyramid, when people aren't constantly struggling just to survive.
their energy is freed up for higher needs.
Exactly. That energy becomes available for level 5. Self-actualization, the pursuit of creativity, purpose, learning, contributing uniquely, defining and living out the meaning part of the holistic win-win. Automation secures the foundation, humans build the cathedral on top.
Now, getting from here to there, it's not going to be smooth sailing. We see conflicts brewing already, say, between advocates for maximum economic efficiency using AI, a kind of thesis, versus those pushing for a post-work society focused on leisure and meaning. An antithesis.
Right, and the Hegelian dialectic gives us a useful lens here. These conflicts aren't necessarily bad, they're potentially necessary steps in finding a better synthesis. The ideal synthesis, the path towards the true holistic win-win, likely involves integrating the valid points from both sides. We probably need the incredible efficiency of automation, from the thesis, combined with the focus on human freedom, dignity, and guaranteed resources, from the antithesis. The synthesis creates something superior to either extreme, maybe a society where hyper-efficient production serves universal well-being and enables human flourishing, rather than just maximizing profit or enforcing idleness.
But again, the technology itself doesn't guarantee we'll reach that synthesis wisely. We need the right mindset, the right values. This brings us to those developmental models, spiral dynamics, and the ethics of care.
Crucial pieces. For a global, holistic win-win system to actually work, you need a significant portion of the population operating from more advanced value systems. Spiral dynamics maps this out.
We need to move beyond the earlier stages.
Yes. We need to shift away from the purely egocentric or ethnocentric, often zero-sum stages, like red power dynamics or blue conformity absolutism, or even orange achievement competition when it becomes purely self-serving, towards systemic yellow thinking, understanding complex systems, valuing functionality and interdependence, and ideally, holistic turquoise thinking, which sees the entire planet and all its inhabitants as one interconnected, living system. Without that broader perspective becoming widespread, global cooperation on the scale needed will constantly break down into tribal, zero-sum conflicts.
And Carol Gilligan's Ethics of Care, EOC, how does that fit in? It addresses that tyranny of the majority risk again, doesn't it?
It does. EOC provides the essential relational and contextual dimension to ethics. For this system to be truly ethical, moral reasoning needs to reach what Gilligan called integrated care, level 3.
What does that mean practically?
It means solutions aren't based only on abstract principles or cold calculations. Integrated care insists on considering the real-world impact on all individuals involved, preserving relationships, giving voice to the vulnerable, and understanding context. It's the empathetic safeguard that prevents the optimization engine from running roughshod over real human needs and experiences in the name of a calculated greater good. It embeds compassion into the system's logic.
Okay, now let's talk governance. The big challenge here is the speed mismatch, right? The law of accelerating returns, LOAR.
Yes. Technology, especially AI, develops exponentially. Government institutions, laws, regulations, they tended to evolve linearly through slow, deliberate processes.
So technology constantly outpaces the rules.
It inevitably does. This means the traditional role of government as the primary day-to-day manager of the economy becomes increasingly untenable. It simply can't keep up.
So what is the future role of government in this picture?
It has to shift fundamentally from direct economic manager to becoming the ethical regulator and the guarantor of equity.
Okay, break that down. Ethical regulator.
This means focusing intensely on setting the ethical guardrails, defining the rules, the boundaries, the constraints within which the powerful Tier 1 automation systems must operate, translating that holistic win-win ideal, with its protections for justice and rights, into enforceable laws for AI governing data privacy, algorithmic bias, autonomous systems, especially weapons, defining the thou shalt nots.
And guarantor of equity.
This means focusing on equity regulation, designing and overseeing the mechanisms for fairly distributing the immense wealth and productivity generated by the automation layer, ensuring things like UBI, universal access to healthcare and education, are robustly funded and delivered, preventing the kind of extreme inequality that would destabilize the entire system. Government ensures the foundation remains secure for everyone.
Yeah, because AI, climate change, pandemics. These are all inherently global issues. This regulation can't just happen nation by nation, can it?
Absolutely not. Isolated national efforts in a competitive environment would be disastrous, likely leading to an AI arms race or regulatory arbitrage. This is where global cooperation and institutions like the United Nations become not just important, but arguably essential for survival.
What specific role can the UN play?
It's the only existing platform with the potential legitimacy and scope to forge the necessary global ethical framework and coordination mechanisms. Individual nations acting alone will likely optimize locally, falling back into that zero-sum trap.
And we're seeing steps in this direction.
We are. Look at the UN General Assembly resolution from 2024 on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI, a global consensus statement on principles. They've established a high-level advisory body on AI, bringing diverse global expertise together. There are proposals for an independent international scientific panel on AI, modeled perhaps on the IPCC for climate change, to provide impartial assessments.
So moving beyond just risk management.
Yes, and also actively harnessing AI for positive goals. The UN is heavily involved in coordinating efforts to use AI to accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, tackling poverty, health, education globally, using the power of these tools for coordinated, positive-sum global outcomes. #TED Outro.
Wow. Okay, that's been quite a journey. From the psychology of envy all the way up to global AI governance and the future of humanity.
It covers a lot of ground, doesn't it?
It really does. But the core message, the final synthesis seems clear.
Yeah.
Getting to a sustainable, truly holistic, win-win society.
Right.
It's not just about building bigger, faster technology.
No, the tech is maybe the easier part in the long run.
It requires these simultaneous deep shifts across the board, right?
Right.
We need the individual psychological capacity for furgun, for celebrating shared success. We need institutional redesign like stakeholder capitalism to change the rules of the game. We need that broader systemic awareness, the empathy of integrated care.
All guided by a clearly defined ethical North Star. A North Star that, yes, advanced AI might actually help us navigate towards, but only if we set the destination correctly.
Which means the work for governments, for institutions like the UN, for all of us, really, starts now. We have to define those ethical goals, those non-negotiables for technologies that might still be years or decades away.
Absolutely. Defining that objective function, drawing the clear line between what constitutes societal health and what looks like societal cancer, that is arguably the defining challenge of our time.
So we want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. Maybe the ultimate test of whether we've built a truly successful, holistic win-win society won't be its GDP figures or its technological marvels. Maybe the real measure will be how effectively we've managed to eliminate the need for schadenfreude.
When every person's success genuinely feels like it expands the potential and the joy of the whole system.
Then maybe we'll know we're getting there. So the question for you is, in your own life right now, what specific small wins can you spot or maybe even create? Where can you consciously shift an interaction at work, in your community, even in your family, away from a zero-sum dynamic towards a positive-sum outcome.
Something to think about. Join us next time as we continue the deep dive.